Welcome to Mr. Larry C. Johnson, who from the Swedish audience is quite known already. I don't have to go into your background, but you've been a CIA analyst and you worked for the American State Department for years before. And now you're an independent analyst, from what I understand, and you're joining us from Russia right now.
I am.
Tell me what's the reason you went to St. Petersburg in the first place?
I was invited to make a presentation at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. This is an annual event. It's, apparently become one of the largest number attending. Really quite an event.
Right. And there's a lot of nations there. In Sweden, we're quite close to St. Petersburg geographically. Nobody's been speaking in the media about this event, but there's a lot of countries there, I guess, representatives from very many nations, right?
Yeah, particularly the global south. Europe apparently chooses not to participate. You're familiar with the expression, cutting off your nose to spite your own face. That's Europe. Europe, instead of finding a way to live in peace with Russia, is looking to find a way to go to war with Russia.
Right.
And it's pretty stupid, given the fact that Europe's nowhere near capable enough to get engaged.
You mean militarily, we have no chance against the Russian might?
Right.
Well, I think we understand that. The Swedish government last week signed an agreement with the illegal president of the Ukraine, Zelensky, to give them a 10.5, approximately $11 billion worth of weapons and air capability. Swedish Saab 340, refurbished as an AWACS, basically, is going to be given to Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they're given two, is my understanding. They're going to give two.
Two of them, yeah.
Which is, what's the goal? Well, the goal is to enable the Ukrainians to try to kill more Russians. Okay. I'm sure that'll work out well. Just imagine that if Sweden was being attacked or was at war with Finland, and then the Russians said, "Okay, I will lend Finland AWACS so they can kill more Swedes." That'd go over well in Sweden? I don't think so.
No.
So this is the kind of arrogance on the part of Sweden that they've disgraced their, the legacy of Sweden was as, a country notorious in a good way for being neutral, for, wanting to not get involved with war, but to try to be a mediator, try to bring out peace. Now completely lost that. It's gone down the same rat hole with the rest of the NATO crowd.
Yeah.
And I think it's a matter of time before those AWACS get shot down. And if it's crewed by some Swedes, hey, they should have thought about it before they climbed on that plane. Because if those planes are used in any way to carry out attacks inside Russia proper, the Russians will have every reason in the world, every justifiable reason to shoot them down.
Yep. And Sweden never really had a reason to get involved this way. We already sent a bunch of money and a lot of tanks and Archer artillery systems to Ukraine, and we're now out of our own resources.
Yeah, it's just this is like group insanity. NATO's behavior. That they're like I don't know if you've been at a casino where you've seen degenerate gamblers, and they're got losing hands, and they keep putting more and more money down. That's NATO. That's Sweden.
Yeah.
The bet
I've
was
been in Las Vegas
we're going to
many
use
times.
Ukraine. Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, we didn't lose everything. You still have a shirt on your back.
Yeah. I actually was in a casino in Las Vegas at the Flamingo, I think it was, when we thought it was an earthquake. But there was one guy that jumped from the tower down on the casino and took his life because he had lost all his money.
Oh man, yeah. Well, that's sort of the situation that NATO's in now.
Yeah,
They've bet the house and they've lost,
exactly.
and it's so unnecessary.
Yeah,
Russia, Russia really has been minding its own business. If it's paying attention to what's happening in Georgia and what's happening in Ukraine, because it's right on its damn doorstep. In the same way the United States pays attention to what happens in the Caribbean and what happens in Mexico and what happens in Canada. And any country that has any kind of power influence worries about what is doing, because that can create a conflict or a problem or a threat. And yet it's ridiculous.
yeah. And I know from other sources, Sweden has a formidable, about 17 capable military bases on our territory. And the Russians are very close to us, especially to North Sweden. The Murmansk base, which is about 800 miles north of St. Petersburg, is very close to the Swedish Air Force base, the most important one we have. And the most important export harbor is in Luleå, North Sweden. And we know from intelligence things, the Russians are calibrating their rockets, their missiles for those two. That would be the 1st they do if we continue this shit. Governments, I don't know what they've been bought by the oligarch family of Wallenberg. The family of Wallenberg owns all of the weapon industry in both Britain, Sweden, and they are part owners of Raytheon, Boeing, and what's the other one? I forget. But they're powerful.
Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they just received an order for weaponry that is kept secret for $7 billion. $7 billion. So they're laughing all the way to the bank, and the Swedish government's going, "Yeah, all right, let's do it."
Yep, follow the money.
Exactly. All right. Tell us shortly, what's your experience about visiting Russia? I mean, I heard you on the live. You said that you went to a grocery store, and that was kind of an interesting experience. I also follow a lot of Russian people.
It was, I don't know if anybody is familiar with Walmart. So in the United States, Walmart is this super shopping. It's a combination grocery and household items. That's near the hotel where I am staying in St. Petersburg. There is a business just like that.
Okay.
And remember in the old days, when Robin Williams made that movie Moscow on the Hudson, where he played I guess a Russian musician who gets to New York City, defects, and he can't believe all the choices, there's so much produce. They weren't like the image that was presented then of the Soviet Union. People had to stand in line to get just a lousy piece of meat, and then the butchers' areas were empty, and it was nothing but scarcity. Well, Russia's nothing like that anymore. Russia is on par with anything that you'd find in the United States in terms of the supply and variety, with the added advantage that it's much cheaper, much more inexpensive. I don't want to use the word cheap because sometimes that implies poor quality. So it is good quality, but it's not expensive.
Right.
So people can get more value for the money they spend.
Mm-hmm.
And Russia it's a modern society, and it's really, we, on the one hand, I can be sort of very pessimistic about the West and particularly the United States. But then you look at what Russia has gone through with the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the hell they went through in the 90s, and just sort of let's call it both spiritual, economic, political rebirth into the 2000s. And, Vladimir Putin has played a critical role in making that happen. So one that can't be ignored. I don't think it's an accident. And it was not done by trying to go out and carry out conquests of other people. In fact, it was the CIA in the 1990s that basically was funding the Chechens, or helping the Chechens, the Islamic radicals in the Chechens, fight a guerrilla war against the Russian state. And ultimately, they were destroyed. They were beaten back. The Russians prevailed. But so that's another example of where the West was directly involved with trying to foment death, destruction, civil war in Russia.
Mm.
So we're now seeing a resurgent Russia. Russia, according to personal purchasing power parity, PPP, when they measure it in terms of gross domestic product, is the fourth largest economy in the world. The only ones bigger are China, United States, India, and then Russia.
Right.
Russia's bigger than Germany, bigger than Japan.
Mm. Well, I traveled in East Europe in the 70s, and it was terrible. Everything was scarce. You could go into a big shopping building, and there was nothing on the shelves, nothing at all. And we're talking in 1978, 79, in 1980. And I worked in Russia in 1992, and it was still in despair, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a tremendous development under the new regime, and not at least Putin, I guess, and his, entourage. So that's remarkable to see.
Yeah, it is.
Because it was terrible during the communist regime in Eastern Europe. We were talking Poland, Hungary, Romania, Russia. Romania, I went there for a sports competition in the 70s. People had nothing. It was terrible. But Bucharest looked like Paris, but it was only for the leaders. They had grand avenues in Bucharest, but people on the outside, they had nothing. It was terrible. It was really awful.
But, actually, that's sort of where the United States is headed right now, where this elite political economic class that is developing are enjoying many of the benefits. And The average working person is not. They're suffering. They're the ones getting hurt most by inflation.
Yeah.
I could see, and in fact, you're seeing it out in San Francisco where you got the streets clogged with homeless, and so the wealthy can sort of get by it, but the average people have homes and are trying to protect the value of those homes, or they're the ones suffering because when you have all these drug-addled people on the streets and they're engaged with criminal activity, it's not safe. Can't let your children to go outdoors to play. And I was reminded of that. I had to fly back to, I'd lived in Washington, D.C. in the suburbs in Bethesda for 40 years, going back to 1979. So it was a combination of being both in the suburbs, but seeing it back in the day when you didn't have all these luxury automobile dealerships everywhere. That's changed. And now you're seeing mega mansions being built in these little neighborhoods where I used to live. I remember the house we bought on West Virginia Avenue, which is really in the heart of downtown Bethesda, just off of Wisconsin Avenue. We paid $135,000 for it back in 1985, 86. And boy, we thought my God, that was expensive.
Yeah.
You couldn't touch that house now for less than $1 million. That's just between inflation
But if I have
and
it
how
right,
prices have escalated.
my ex-wife lived in Sterling, Virginia. She worked as a flight attendant. So she had a pretty good townhouse, I believe, that I paid for. Bethesda, to me, not having lived there, that was like the upper class area, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was considered that. Bethesda, Chevy Chase.
Right.
But still, we were able to, when we lived there, we actually lived there initially in Silver Spring. Our first house, it was a one-bedroom townhouse in Chevy Chase, which is right on the line with Chevy Chase and
Right.
Bethesda. But then when we finally bought in 85, we bought this, the house was built in like 1934, 35. It had 2 bedrooms, one bathroom. So, it wasn't some luxury place. And then we did an addition added on to it. But again, it started off as $135,000, which was, to us seemed terribly expensive back then.
Right.
But you just, when you see all these, you got to step back and say, okay, where's all this money coming from?
Yeah.
Because they don't make anything in Washington, D.C. It's not like you got factories. They're not making cars. They're not building computers. They're not, it was, it's government. People are making money off of government.
Right.
So
taxpayer money.
Right.
Well, I bought a house in the mid 80s in a decent neighborhood in Los Angeles called Westchester. It's close to the Marina del Rey, and it's like a middle class area. I think I paid also about 120 or 130,000, and that house was also built in the 40s. And in California, it's good to be in a house built by wood because they don't fall when the earthquake hits. So I stayed there for a while, and that was an interesting thing. And of course, I made a lot of money when we sold it. When I divorced my wife, we sold the house, and actually it had gone up wildly in price because it was a safe neighborhood. And
right.
but now I live in Stockholm, as you see behind me. And I think the architecture, if you look out in St. Petersburg, is quite similar, although St. Petersburg is
Right.
much larger.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you ever been able to see some of the sites there, the Winter Palace and things like that?
Not many. I was able to walk along Nevsky Prospect
All right.
yesterday, one of the main drags going downtown.
Oh, I know it very well. I've
So
been there
it's
many times.
yeah. So we'll walk down and caught a meal at the place called the Literary Cafe.
Okay.
So
Yeah. They also have Europe's highest building. It's the Gazprom head office out in the close to the Finnish Bay. I think it's 280 meters high.
oh, okay. Haven't seen that yet.
All right. You'll see it if you go east. Oh, west. Sorry, west.
Okay.
But Russia is a formidable economy. We can conclude that how they transformed from communism to capitalism is astonishing, really.
Well, I don't think we've got the full story. Because when you go back and look at what the original Soviet Union was with the Soviet Revolution
Right.
into the 1920s, my understanding is the vast majority of Russia was uneducated, illiterate. The education was something reserved for the very upper class, the wealthy. And one of the things that was instituted under, and I don't want to minimize some of the abuses that took place under Stalin, but it has to be acknowledged that the Soviets did work some miracles in terms of educating the population, doing a turnaround in a relatively short amount of time, that they had an educated population that could then work in factories that were critical in winning World War II. That these defense establishments, you couldn't just take a bunch of uneducated peasants that were used to, raising pigs or cows and then put them in a factory where they're building aircraft engines, tanks, automobiles, trucks, artillery shells, across the board.
Yeah.
So in a relatively short period of time, the Soviets were able to achieve a level of education in spite of, let's call it, the communist indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the indoctrination was still there about being a loyal party member, etc. But they managed to not corrupt the entire education process. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was still that legacy of education, of the science, technology, engineering, mathematics background, the STEM, that really gives the Russians an advantage over many other countries, particularly in the United States. And now that they've created more of a, let's call it, a market-based system, or they've removed a lot of the political restraints and allowed, let's say, the capitalist interest to take off. But that's sort of what brought Vladimir Putin to power.
Yeah.
I think Yeltsin recognized he had awakened a Frankenstein, and all of these oligarchs who were in bed with Western oligarchs were busy figuring out how they could rape Russia. Man, how do we'll control the aluminum, we'll control the uranium, we'll control the rare earth metals, we'll control the oil, the gold, the gas, the nickel, the nitrogen, up and down. They were going to control everything and take it to enrich people overseas and not ensure that the people in Russia benefited.
Yeah.
And Vladimir Putin just basically said, momentito, hold on, we're not doing that. And we're going to, if you guys want the make money, you can make money, but you got to make sure it's being reinvested here and that you're going to stay out of the politics, that you're going to use your money. You know, you can buy your yachts, but also we're going to improve the lives of the Russian people.
Yeah, I think that's something that Western opinion and media don't recognize, that's a fact. So,
Oligarchs.
you might, think what you want about Vladimir Putin, but he's a nationalist and he says Russia first,
Yeah.
and that's what he is doing. So,
Yeah.
all right. Super. Thanks, Larry. I'm a little bit sorry about the connection, but I think it's going to be fine. This is a recording, so it'll be up on my channel. I'll send you the file when it's up, if you want to disperse it in some way. So
That'll be great.
lots of thanks for taking your busy schedule.
I'm just apologize. We had so many hiccups trying to connect. But
Yeah,
at least we finally got connected.
Also, I was confused a little bit about the time difference. It's only 1 hour between us, but and I sent a Zoom link that didn't work to begin with. Then I went out and another one, but we finally got it together. So thanks very much.
All right, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Pleasure.
Okay, bye, Hagen.
Bye.